Again, we want to thank you for being on this call today with Monica Rebella, CPA and president of Rebella Accountancy, which is a CPA firm that specializes in accounting, tax, and consulting services for hundreds of dentists in California. The topic of our call today is Life After Dentistry on Your Terms with Jonathan Moffat. If you're not currently a client of Rebella Accountancy or you have not met her, Monica Rebella is a CPA and has 27 years of accounting and tax expertise, which includes 13 years working with the Big Four, Big Eight firms, and over 14 years experience working with dental practices. She is past president of the Orange County, Long Beach chapter of the California Society of CPAs and is a member of the AICPA. She has conducted training sessions for accounting firms as well as lectured on tax and business matters to the California Society of CPAs, UCLA Dental School, and the Orange County Dental Academy. She runs her own firm in Tustin, California, providing accounting, tax, and consulting services for over 300 businesses throughout California, specializing in dental offices and small businesses. Monica, welcome to the call.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for everyone being on the call this evening. We're going to change it up. We're not going to talk a lot about numbers, which I know you find hard to believe with me. We're going to briefly touch on it, but I get a lot of questions from my clients and potentially those that are listening to this about what all do we need to think about when we're getting ready for retirement. And, of course, we talk about, yes, there's a number that we need to come up with, but there's so much more to what are you going to do with yourself 24/7. What all is that going to look like? And what else do you want to have lined up for yourself just in a whole strategic life plan? So we're great to have with us this evening is Jonathan Moffat. I've known Jonathan now for, I think going on 9 years. I met Jonathan and his father, Clark Moffat, way back when I first took over this practice from Bob Fees. And it was interesting because I found out that Jonathan's grandfather, Clark, his father, his dad, was an orthodontist and retired on Social Security. He had no plan on what he was going to do when he retired. He had no plan on how much money he needed, and they both felt that this was just not the right way to serve the dental community. So for many years now, Jonathan and his father, Clark, have been devoting their time to working with dentists to understand all the challenges in life, the goals in life, as well as where they are and how they're going to reach retirement. So I'm just thrilled that Jonathan's on this with us. Jonathan's married, and he's got 2 kids, McCall 9 and Parker 3. He attended BYU University and finished up his degree with Woodbury and LA area. He got his CFP, which is Certified Financial Planner at UC Irvine. Both Clark and Jonathan work a lot in the dentistry field and give back to the community. You may know some of the charities they're in, but I have a feeling you might know Smiles for Life. So it's great to have a group that also gives back to the dental community. So I'm going to now pass the baton over to Jonathan. Jonathan, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Monica. You know, two people that deal with finance not talking about numbers, that's quite the challenge that you threw out there, but I've gladly accepted.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, Monica, like you said, we often get the question of why dentists and why did we choose and decide to begin working with dentists. And, as you and I were talking in preparation for this call, we talked about what are some examples of, maybe people that didn't plan or thought that they had a plan that went awry. And, we really, my father, as you mentioned, our reason for getting into dentistry was because of my grandfather. Dr. Gordon Moffat was an orthodontist in Los Angeles, and in 1997 on Thanksgiving Day, suffered a heart attack. It wasn't a massive heart attack. He and my grandmother politely excused themselves from dinner and drove up to LA without telling anyone what had happened. And because of that, he spent the next several months in hospitals and long-term care facilities. Over the next year after my grandfather had suffered that heart attack, my father and his brother, who's an attorney, began selling off all of Grandpa's practices. Now, prior to that, Grandpa had a very successful career as an orthodontist and a very fun life. They would go on these fantastic vacations to Balboa Island and Newport Beach every summer for a month. They'd take vacations to Europe and Hawaii regularly. But when it came to planning for his exit strategy, he really didn't spend any time thinking about that. So because he was forced to stop practicing before he was ready, he did not get to really leave dentistry on his terms. And this really had a negative effect on both he and my grandmother through the remainder of their lives. They both passed away relatively short of one another, but I think it's important because, Monica, as you said, I know a lot of our clients as well want to know what happens after dentistry. I think it's important to spend a significant amount of time talking about that and really envisioning what life looks like after dentistry and making sure that you're on the same page as your significant other. So my grandfather didn't really do a good job of this and therefore didn't really have a plan for life after dentistry. And this was something we watched him and my grandmother struggle with, like I said, for the rest of their lives. So that's what we're going to explore this evening. We're going to be talking about a series of questions that will address how you can make sure you have a plan for life after dentistry on your terms. So leading up to this show, Monica and I have had several conversations, and one of the questions that Monica asked was, how do they get started? So I'm sure at some point you've all had a conversation, or maybe you haven't had a conversation. You've certainly had the thought about what life is going to look like after dentistry and where to really start. So in my experience, one of the best places to start, and we can go to the next slide, is with an exercise called the financial roadmap. So the financial roadmap really is the perfect place to start. What you have is, with the financial roadmap, you have a series, it's an exercise that will take you through a series of thought-provoking questions, beginning with the staircase on the upper right-hand of the roadmap. I'm not sure. Let's see here. Are we on that slide, Jeff?
Yes, here.
Monica, can you see it? Okay, great. I can't see it. So the staircase is about your values or what's important to you. And again, our experience is you want to make sure that both you and your significant other are on the same page with your values or the things that matter most to you. Right underneath that, you can see 3 shields. Those are going to represent your goals or personal milestones. So this is where you want to explore what those goals are that you have. Now, this doesn't have to be related or around money. It can literally be anything, serving a mission, giving back to your community, going on this sailing trip that you've wanted to do forever. I mean, we've heard the most amazing goals throughout the years. And this is, again, where you want to really have a chance to have the goals on the same and be on the same page with your spouse for those goals so that you know you're headed in the right direction. On the left-hand side of the financial roadmap, you can see there's a box that says where I am today. And this is for you to put down exactly where you are today so you can benchmark where you are in relation to where you'd like to be, which is represented by your goals. So, to give you an example of how this is, we were having this conversation a few weeks ago with a couple. And he and his wife, we were going through this conversation, and one of their goals was to remodel or buy a new primary residence. Well, said, Jonathan, we talked about this goal and circled around this goal for several years, and we've never been able to come to a conclusion. Well, they're in their late 50s, and they're, looking to stop practicing within the next 5 to 7 years. And so what's great about this exercise and this conversation is that it really provides the platform for spouses, husbands and wives, to really come together and on a goal that maybe they've talked about for a long time. So my comment to them was, well, this is the perfect time to come to conclusion on this goal. And they did. They decided that they were going to actually remodel their existing home as opposed to buying a new home, and that instead of needing $700,000 to do that, they would need significantly less to do that. So this is a great time to collaborate with your significant other on some of those goals or conversations that we all have. I'm married. Monica, I know you're married. We all have these conversations or goals that we, can push off and decide not to have, but this really is that opportunity to have those conversations.
And Jonathan, we're talking about this roadmap for life. So this isn't necessarily the roadmap of life after dentistry as much as it is a conversation about just your overall plans for your life and what you want to do with it. So it can be short-term, long-term, and it should be both, right? So it may be one where, and I sit down with clients, and you do as well, is that this year we want to go and have this vacation, or we want to go and spend time with the kids and the grandkids. Next year we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to spend some money to have them come and be with us for the holidays. So there's short-term, and then there's the long-term. When we retire, we want to be debt-free. We may want to sell our house and go into a single story because we're in a two-story. It's just too hard to get up and down. So there's these short-term things as well as long-term. And you use the roadmap. I know I've talked to my clients. We use this for both of those sets, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Monica, you're exactly right. It doesn't always, and even the goals don't always have to revolve specifically around money or financial goals, as you mentioned. And it's really a neat experience for to just really open up and have a conversation about all of your goals, your wants and desires, without having to. I think something that a lot of us tend to do is get bogged down by the details, right? So you may have a goal of, I'd love to go to Europe for 3 months this summer and then have the grandkids come over for a while, the kids come over for a while. But then the rational side starts to kick in, and is that really going to happen, and how can we really afford to do that? And what this conversation allows you to do is really get those wants and desires out on paper, and without really having to worry about, is this really realistic, at least at this stage in the conversation, is this really realistic, or how exactly we're going to do that? The beauty of this conversation and why this conversation is so fun to have with individuals is because we really are just getting their wants and desires out there, like you said, whether it's next year, 5, 10, 15, or 20 years down the road. If it's in your mind, if you've thought about it and you want to, let's get it down on paper, and then let not worry about how it's going to happen. Then let us or your advisors that you work with figure out how that's going to work, or if that's feasible, if that's possible. So.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you just kind of put them all down, and you don't necessarily prioritize them at first, but eventually you do get into what are the priorities of getting these things accomplished.
Absolutely. And, yes, and we'll talk a little bit about that here a little bit later. So oftentimes you'll hear people refer to Stephen Covey's, it's got to be his most quoted line ever, and I'm sure you've already all said it in your mind before I even say it, which is start with the end in mind. But what does that really mean? So what does your ideal life look like? So I'm going to take a few minutes, and Monica, I believe you make these slides available for everyone after the webinar. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. So you don't need to take notes, but just really think, as you're going to see a series of pictures. And we're really going to talk about, or want you to think about, what does your ideal life look like? And once you'll see at the end, there's going to be a series of questions. And I would encourage you to go back and listen to this, or at least pull those slides off and spend some time thinking about what you want your ideal life to look like. So Jeff, you can go ahead and scroll or click on the next slide. And as you're looking at these photos of these individuals doing whatever it is they're doing that has meaning in their life, I want you to think about, what does it look like after dentistry? And you could even, if you want to, if you're a mid-career or early career dentist, this is a great exercise to start thinking about what you want your ideal life to look like, maybe even possibly while you're practicing, but certainly after you're practicing, after dentistry. What do you want it to look like? Jeff, you can scroll to the next one. what does it sound like? So this is kind of a funny question, but if you really think about what does it sound like, so if you're a snow skier, there's a difference between what skiing on an icy slope sounds like versus skiing through fresh powder. And as the powder wishes through your hair, past your ears, what that sounds like. If you're a fisherman, what does it sound like when the fish takes your line and runs and your reel's going crazy? So what does that sound like? What does it feel like? Okay, so what are you feeling? What are you doing? Jeff, you can just kind of scroll through those So what are you doing? Who are you with? And who are you being? So, Jeff, you can scroll through until we get to those questions, and we'll just sit there for a few minutes. So, as you go back and take time to really think through and write down the answer, your responses to each of these questions, what you'll start to realize is that you will begin to formulate a very clear picture of what your ideal life would look like. Now, I know for some people, certainly it was with my grandfather, this was a very difficult conversation, or for him, dentistry was everything. And something we really encourage and have a lot of conversations with clients is what life looks like after dentistry. So if that's something you struggle with, this is a great exercise to really spend some time on, and it will really kind of get your creative juices flowing to get you really to start to really begin to create and even feel this beginning stages of creating what your ideal life looks like. Also, I would say you want to make sure to involve your spouse or significant other in this conversation. We joke, who are you with? Well, that might be an interesting conversation to have with your spouse or significant other. So I would want to make sure that my name was on my wife's list, and I'm sure my wife would want to make sure that her name was on my list. So it's a great conversation to have and to share with your significant other, and again, to make sure that you're on the same page.
So, Jonathan, I've experienced with the clients, and I'm sure you've experienced with this with clients, is dentistry is everything. Your business is everything, and seeing your patients is important to you. So when you leave dentistry, it's this feeling, okay, we've got freedom to do things we couldn't do because we were working all the time. So it may take months. It may take a year or so to figure out, who are you, this person now? Because I think there's a tendency when you first have sold the practice to go and do some of the things because you have the time. You can go take a month and go somewhere, but you still haven't formulated who you are now in your next life. And it may take a little more time to do that. So you can start the process now and really start understanding yourself, but it's once you really have got all that time and you've done some of the things that you hoped and wanted to do, that you really start thinking, okay, now what is my life? Now I got that out of the way.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it reminded me, Monica, I was talking to a client who sold his practice a couple years ago in Fort Worth, and I was just talking to him a few weeks ago, and I remember we were joking because he said, and this is a man of many hobbies, and even him, dentistry was literally everything. And I remember talking to him a few months after he sold his practice. I said, so how you doing? How's life after practice? And he goes, well, my attic's clean, my garage is clean, my barn is clean. He's like, I clean just about everything I can clean at my house. And it does. It takes you a while to kind of settle in, and it is a shift in your life. And so I would encourage. I know a couple months ago you had Dr. Abernathy on talking about transition and transitioning your practice.
Right.
Well, a big piece of transitioning your transition plan should be cutting back to a couple days a week towards the end of your career. So instead of working 4 days a week, maybe you're working 2 days or a day and a half or maybe even a day a week, so that you're slowly transitioning into that next phase of your life, but you're still kind of have one foot in the practice where it feels nice and cozy, so you haven't quite, left, but that's a part of it as well, and certainly something you want to take into consideration as you are looking at that next phase is if you are one of these people that you just know that's going to be difficult for you to do, really spend some time, talk to Monica about that transition, and even talk to Dr. Abernathy, and he's done this for hundreds of dentists, and just really get an idea of how that might be a smoother transition.
Yeah, and what I'll say to that is if you do cut back and you haven't sold the practice yet, then you need an associate in there because I want you to keep production high so that you get a good price for your practice. It's not your entire retirement plan, but it is a portion of your retirement plan. So we don't want you to cut back days, cut back production, because that means less money for the practice. You need to get someone in there to keep revenue going. So all good.
Absolutely. And just as an end note to the story about my client in Texas, he is an avid photographer and has since published 2 books of photography since stopping practice. So, there is life after the practice, after dentistry.
Great, yeah.
So, all right, we can go to the next slide. So, Monica, I know you said we weren't going to talk about numbers, but this is such an important, this is a question I get, and I'm sure you do as well, all the time. It's just a question we get all the time. So ING did a great job with their advertising on what's your number, or know your number. And I would say that for most of the people that we talk to, one of the most surprising conversations that we have really centers around how much money they need to maintain their lifestyle after they're no longer in practice. So this is not only the amount of money that you need to have saved for living your expenses, but think about, if you go back and look at the financial roadmap, all of those goals that you're going to have as well, you have to take into consideration. So this is a great conversation, and Monica, I know you have these conversations with your clients about expectations. And because the bottom line is, it's important to know your number for multiple reasons, and it's really kind of almost a tricky phrase because I don't believe that there's just one static number that you're going to have. It's going to change depending on, because life changes. So, but you want to keep in mind that people are living longer. For example, I have a client, that him and his wife, in their plan, they plan, I'm not exaggerating here, he plans to live until 124 and she plans to live to 122.
They really think they're going to live that long?
They really think they're going to live that long. And I can tell you they are in their mid-40s, and they are very, very healthy. They're very proactive, health-wise. And something to consider is that medicine is advancing so rapidly that the probability of you living longer than you may think, or living longer than your parents may have or your grandparents may have, is a growing possibility every single day. Now, I'm not saying you're going to live to 120, but the chances are that you live to 100 or close to are very high. So something to take into consideration is, as you meet with your advisors, just something to keep in mind, most software for financial planning or projecting numbers ends at around age 100. So you want to make sure that if you think, or if you want to have a plan that takes you beyond that your advisors take that into consideration when coming up with that number.
I think it's also prudent. These people you were suggesting are in their 40s, but we all know that for most of us, when we get older, you just don't move around like you're used to.
Right.
So, going and doing things and traveling, and it becomes more difficult unless you're lucky enough to be as healthy as long as you can be, and you don't have the knee problems and hip problems and all these other things that I wish everyone would be that healthy and not have those. But so, when we're looking at, how much money do you need for your lifestyle changes. Lifestyle changes as you get older and you age. So, you will have that conversation with your financial advisor, with me, with Jonathan. It comes down to these priorities that you set. But we're not going to talk a lot about numbers because everyone's number is different. Everybody's number is different. So we're not going to spend time on that, but just to know that, it's a factor. but we want to focus on, because that's a whole different subject that we talk about and have webinars on, but we wanted to talk about some of the other things. So let's go to how you monitor this with everybody, Jonathan.
Perfect. So one of the questions that Monica and I want to make sure we address was an example of a plan done right. So for a plan to be done right, it should include these 10 items. And Jeff, you can go to the next slide. Great. So one is a step-by-step plan of action. So this is really like a to-do list specifically for you to follow so that you're making progress towards achieving your goals. For example, you may have just met with your insurance agent and they tell you that you should go home and walk through your entire home with a video camera to video all of your belongings so that in the event of a fire or theft, you actually have tangible proof of what you have so that you can replace everything that was lost. So for most of us, we'll leave that meeting and maybe we'll do it and maybe we'll forget about it. But what you should do as just kind of a recommendation is ask your insurance agent to email you all of those types of action items from that meeting. And then keep a master action plan where you can add and check off items when they become complete. So you could also do this with any of your other advisors you meet with. So, for example, Monica may have certain things she wants you to do. And so one way to make sure that you have this kind of active, ongoing master task list is to either make sure you take those action items down or ask your advisors if they wouldn't mind emailing you those to-do lists from that meeting and make sure you're keeping that master task list. So a step-by-step plan of action is absolutely key to making sure that you have a plan that's done right. The second is a cash reserve plan. So this is not just how much money you need to have in your savings in case of emergencies, but think outside the box. What about how much you need to have to hold you over during any waiting periods you might have for insurance policies like your disability policy? So, that could be anywhere depending on your policy from, 30 to 90 days. A rough rule of thumb for this is 6 months of expenses. So you want to make sure that you have that, and it's also a good time to go look at some of those insurance policies you have and actually see what the waiting periods are. So again, you can kind of gauge what you need to have in order to, again, we're talking about how to prevent derailing your plan so that you can leave dentistry on your terms. And we want to make sure that these 10 things are in your plan. Third would be a debt plan. So a specific plan to reduce and or eliminate your debt on a schedule that really works for you and your specific situation. So how does your current debt or any future debt you may acquire impact your plan to leave dentistry on your terms? How does it impact the sale of your practice or transitioning your practice? So this is a really good conversation because, as Monica will certainly let you know, sometimes there are tax implications, and there are ways to do this in a more tax-efficient way or not. So again, these are just items for you to kind of check off and have these conversations with your advisors like Monica, who can help you really identify that schedule and a plan so you can reduce or eliminate your debt. Number 4 is an insurance plan. So one recommendation that I would have would be to have an independent insurance agent review your coverages. So you can call just about any independent insurance agent and ask them how much they would charge you to review all of your insurances. So you can let them know up front that you will not be buying any insurance from them, but you really just want their professional opinion and objective review of all of your coverages, and you're willing to pay them for their time. So this will usually cost you between $150 to $250 to have that review done, but it's a great way to have someone who is not going to, they know up front you're not buying insurance from them, but really have a kind of a third-party review. And an example of this just happened. We were bringing on a new client a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about a time recently in his practice where they had some water damage. And he was under the impression that his insurance, everything was good and that they were going to be fine and that they were covered. Well, he received a bill for $200,000 that was not covered under his existing insurance policy. So $150 to $250 is not that much money to just have someone have an objective review of your coverages to make sure that you absolutely are covered. And I would recommend having this done fairly regularly, like about once every 1.5 to 2 years. Fifth is a plan for assets. So this is not just how you will invest your money during your working years, but also you want to make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to take your money out and in a way that doesn't deplete your assets too fast. So you kind of touched on this a little bit. You know, we're living longer, the cost of living, you want to take all those into consideration. So when you're talking to your advisors, make sure that a lot of times we talk about accumulation of assets and where to invest and how we can invest our money, but there's not a lot of talk around how that we're actually going to take that money out and use it in a way that's efficient, both from a tax planning standpoint, but also, you know, in a way where we're not going to run out of money too soon. Number 6, comprehensive financial.
Can
Yeah.
we talk about the plan for assets? Because, you know, I'm an accountant. I know what an asset is. You're a financial person. You know what an asset is. But we may have people in the plans going, I don't know what you're talking about. So,
good point.
So when we say plan for assets, we're talking about how your stocks, your bonds, your cash accounts, your cash reserves, how it's invested, right? We're talking about how to invest your money and your stock and your investments, correct?
Absolutely, and it could be real estate, if you own your building, if you own rental real estate, really any of those assets in addition to what you said as well, Monica, absolutely.
So when we say plan for assets, we just mean, is it all in real estate? Is it all in your dental practice? Is it all in stocks? Okay, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we need to look at, okay, we want some stuff that's pre-tax. We want some stuff that's sheltered for tax. We want some stuff that's for growth. So we're talking about the plan of what you have and how best to invest it, not only tax, but just so that it's going to make sure it earns enough money and keeps earning money for you, right? That's kind of
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. And Monica, as you know, and most of our clients, when they're accumulating their money while they're working, a lot of times that might be in retirement vehicles. So they're saving taxes. So really, there's not that much tax planning around that piece of their life, right? Because it's just
right.
tax deferred, and there's really not much to do from a tax planning standpoint. But
other than how it's invested within there, so that they've got the growth they need.
Exactly. And so something that a topic that we see that isn't discussed nearly enough is when it comes to actually how you're going to take that money out of the various investments that you have, because that's where the significant tax planning can make
right.
a huge difference.
Right.
You know,
and
how successful that is.
Right.
Yep.
The order of taking it out. Exactly.
Yep. Exactly. So plan for assets isn't just how it's invested; it's also the other piece, which again, you know, the taking it out, which is a part of the conversation that we really don't see a lot of advisors having with their client.
Excellent.
Okay, great. Number 6, comprehensive financial plan. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically, you want to make sure that if you have a comprehensive financial plan, that it goes beyond the investments and the investment vehicles, that it really does touch on all of these areas. And an example of this would be identity theft protection. So if you want to talk about a real, truly comprehensive plan and so you have complete confidence in your ability to leave dentistry on your own terms, fraud and identity theft is becoming a growing concern for everyone. And there are a lot of services out there, some that you're very, very familiar with, like LifeLock and some others, that can help identify and sometimes even prevent when identity theft happens. An example of this, I have a client, he was in New York with his kids over Christmas, and 2 weeks ago received a call from LifeLock saying there were fraudulent charges made on your card, and they said, do you have your card with you? And he said, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And they said, well, these purchases were made with a physical card. So what I'm sure you've seen them on the news, but they have these readers now that can read the magnetic strip on your credit cards, and they have You now have wallets that you can get that will block those card readers. So really being proactive in protecting not only yourself in your personal life, but in the business from fraud and identity theft is a part of that comprehensive financial plan. And one point I really wanted to just bring out when we touched on that topic.
Well, I want to add one more thing, is that there are scams out of there, and people retired are the biggest prey of the scammers out there. And there's one that is continuing to come up, and we're at tax time again, is people calling and saying they're the IRS. And you have to pay your tax right now, or we're going to put a lawsuit against you. We're going to go to court, and we're going to seize your house, and you've got to pay it right now. The IRS does never call you out of the blue and tell you have to pay right now over the phone. Never. Never, never, never. Okay. The second is sometimes they call and they say that they're going to deport people or just terrible, terrible things, and they're all scams. So having this comprehensive plan and having an advisor that wants to go through this with you is important, that you have that touch of these trusted advisors, because they're going to tell you, don't fall prey to these things. And it's part of having a good person to sit down and go through these things with you really every year, because you know that you've got someone that's watching for you. That's part of the plan.
Yeah, great advice. The Seattle Study Club's big event was last weekend and in Florida, and I was talking to a client who came back, and he said that there was a gentleman that addressed all of this, and he said, very similar to what you said, Monica, if you find someone asking you either through an email, online, or over the phone for account information, social security numbers, PIN numbers, his comment was, just yell out, hogwash, and it will kind of break the conversation and give you a chance to really think, okay, see how they react, and just kind of take a step back. And I thought, well, it's kind of interesting, but anyways, that was his suggestion. So thought that was interesting. Just beware, keep an ear up, and Monica is a great person. Your advisors are great people. It's better to pass something by them really quick via an email or a quick phone call than to just say, I think this is okay, and move forward. So number 7 is tax planning. So this is where your relationship with Monica is so great. The fact that you have a tax advisor who is so aware of her client's needs, to have regular education webinars. I know you just had a seminar last week for your client, and so it's so great to see. So your regular meetings with Monica will be so helpful in you really having a clear idea of where you are going, and a big piece to have in your comprehensive plan. Number 8 is estate planning. So I'd say one of the most common things we hear when we're during first appointments with clients and prospective clients is, we haven't had our wills or trusts reviewed in quite a while. So you will want to have your estate planning documents reviewed at least every 5 years. Almost every estate plan we've reviewed needs to be updated, because either it doesn't reflect what the current wishes and desires are of the client, or they've maybe purchased a home or sold a home, or there's always changes, and we just see this as such a gaping hole in so many of the people that we talk to that it's a very simple. It'll cost you a little bit of money. Some estate planning attorneys will even review it at no cost, because but then they'll charge you for doing the work. But something that I'd say needs to happen at minimum every 5 years.
Well, I'll tell you what's important about that is the law changes every 5 years. There's things that change in it. We went from a healthcare directive to, it's called something else now. And we had the durable power of attorney for health, and it turned into an affirmative action form, of which the hospitals are on top of. But, if you didn't know that, it's not in your trust, and you could have a problem with people making decisions about you that you don't want. The other is people forget to update the schedule of where everything is. Yeah. So you did one 15 years ago, and you have bank accounts at, guess what, Washington Mutual. It doesn't exist anymore. So where is that bank account?
Right.
You've sold properties, you've moved, but mostly it's not keeping that schedule up to date of your life insurance, your disability insurance, what bank accounts you have, and the account numbers, your house, where your escrows are, just the policies. critical phone numbers for people to have. So what's important about that is that someone is going to do that with you if you don't keep up on it yourself. So not only the changes in the document itself, that they're still legal, but just the fact that if someone had to pick it up and deal with your estate, they'd have no idea where your accounts are or if they're missing anything. So that's critical.
Absolutely. Number 9 is regular meetings with to update your progress. So again, for each of you, this is going to probably vary depending on what you feel comfortable with. So some will feel comfortable with meeting once a year with their advisors. Others may want to meet more frequently than that. In 2009, we interviewed a group of clients and asked how often they would want to meet with their advisors to know that they were on track. And the answer was 3 times a year. So just the question is, how often are you meeting with your advisors to make sure that you're aware of, to make sure that they are aware of any changes you may have, any updates that are going on in your life? So maybe 3 times a year is too much for you. So what is that number for you so that you can really feel like you're on top of your plan and that you're continuing to make progress towards your goals? I personally sit down once every 90 days and reevaluate my goals and progress towards them. So again, it's going to be different for everyone. I know some people that do it on a monthly or even a weekly basis. So sometimes what was important to you before is no longer important to you. And really the only way you'll know that is by regularly reevaluating your goals. So, kind of going on what Monica said back to your estate plan, there may be items that maybe once were, a few years ago, and now things have changed. Same thing with your goals. You may have goals that were once important to you, but now life has changed. Things you've experienced, had new experiences, and now maybe those goals aren't as important to you. So regularly reviewing those, my suggestion would be at least 3 times a year does make sure that you're tracking to make sure you're staying on track to your goals. And then last but not least is a specific plan for each goal. So think of each goal as kind of a separate mini plan. You should know exactly what to do every year so that you know how to reach your goals and that you know that you are on track to reaching your goals. So those are the 10 items when Monica and I were talking about what should a plan have, or an example of a plan done right. And those are the 10 items that we came up with as far as this is really what you should have to have a truly comprehensive plan that will give you confidence to know that you're on track and that you can leave dentistry on your terms.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So one of the things that, as everyone's getting ready to retire, that comes up all the time. I had 2 calls today on this. When should I start taking my Social Security? And what are the strategies around Social Security? Where do you put that in your plan? Where do you think that fits here? Because it's in here somewhere. Where do you think it is in the?
Yep, it fall under comprehensive financial plan is where it fall under. And there's in fact, if anyone who would like this, they can email us. We have a Social Security Max. It's a worksheet. You go onto Social Security's website, you fill out some information, you give us those numbers, and it's just the income numbers, and we ask a little questionnaire they fill out. And it'll actually generate, this is in order to maximize your Social Security benefit. This is the exact month and day you should, call in and get your benefit. So we're happy to provide. That's a report we provide at no cost for anyone who'd like, but it would fall within the comprehensive financial plan.
So would that be, I'm going to work until I'm 70, so I'll let my wife start taking on it. So does it go through that?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah,
yep.
Perfect. What a great tool.
Yeah, addresses all that, and it tells you for both you, your wife, exactly it's how to maximize your benefit and exactly what to do for that. So
wow, awesome. Well, that's a great offer, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Very generous.
Thanks. So one of the questions we had was when Monica and I were talking was what to not put off. So in addition to reevaluating your goals, you need to make sure that you understand where you are now in relation to where you want to be. So being able to regularly measure whether you're ahead of track, on track, or off track towards reaching your goals by your target date is so important. So this is, and we can go to the next slide. So this is an example of a report that is generated to just help clients know exactly where you are and if you're on track or behind track or ahead of track of where you are for reaching your goals. So you feel free to copy this spreadsheet if you'd like, or your advisors may have their own form of this, but you want to make sure that each of your goals and milestones are listed there, the goal amount is listed, and the future need takes into consideration inflation. So if your goal is, if you need $2 million in today's dollars, in 10 years from now, what's that number going to be? Because most likely it's going to be a little more than $2 million. The goal date is important to have on there because in order to have a goal that's attainable, you need to have a deadline of when you're going to achieve that goal. And then you can see to the right of that where it says goal status. This will track whether you're ahead, on track, or behind. And then months until your goal. So again, you're kind of tracking almost like a countdown of where you are in relation to where you want to be. And then down below, yes.
We weren't going to talk about numbers, but
nope.
They do count sometimes.
and I just want to touch on this to just stress the importance of tracking where you currently are in relation to your goals, and it's really staying on track of that. So we can go to the next slide. So this is kind of a cool story. There's a gentleman by the name of Sir David Brailsford, and he is the coach for anyone who's a cycling fan out there. I'm sure you have some clients that love cycling. He is the team leader, the manager of the Sky cycling team. They've won 2 Tour de France's and some gold medals in the London Olympics. He came up with, before they had all that success, he came up with a theory called the aggregation of marginal gain. And what this really does, he came up with this theory to help his cycling team win more races. So this was his theory. If his team could just improve in several different areas by just 1%, although that doesn't sound like much, over time it makes a huge difference. So he said that in the beginning, there's basically no difference between making a choice that is basically that is 1% better or 1% worse. So in other words, it won't impact you very much today, but as time goes on, those small improvements or decline compound, and you suddenly find a very big gap between people that make slightly better decisions on a daily basis and those who don't. So this is why those small choices don't make much of a difference at the time, but they do add up over the long term. So I'm sure you've all heard that, pilots that put their plane on autopilot still have to make course corrections because the plane still gets knocked off course. Just even if it's a fraction of a degree, it's still off course. So again, I like to show this and make this illustration because sometimes we have clients that feel like it's too late for them, or they're behind, or maybe they've waited too long, or some event has happened in their life where they feel like it's no longer possible for them. And in our experiences, by making small choices over the long run for the positive can make a huge difference in the long run. And it's not necessarily doesn't mean that you are not going to be able to achieve your goals. So that's why I wanted to make this point.
And I think that's to the point where I asked Jonathan to say, what if you haven't started? Or what if you had a plan and it's just gone terribly awry? Someone got sick, maybe a grandchild, maybe a child, that you had to go take care of. Maybe it's just gone, you had to take extra debt because of that and mortgage the house. What if it's gone terribly awry? How do you get back on track? And this is kind of the concept of, how do you get it back on track? If you just make little increases back towards your goal, you're going to get there. And I think that this is a great story to say that, is that you just have to put a new goal out there. Okay, it is where it is now. You've got to put a new goal there, and we can make increases to get back towards where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, Monica, so you had asked the question, what do you do if you've waited too long? And I go back to my grandfather. I'd say that, in my opinion, in our experience, the only way to know that you've really waited too long is when you find yourself being forced to stop practicing for some reason. So we have people calling us all the time who are 5 or 10 years from wanting to stop practicing, and most of the time they just don't know if they have enough to stop practicing or how to get to that point. I'll give you an example. Is several years ago we brought on a client, and at 62 he was divorced. At the time, at 62, he had 3 kids, ages 8, 12, and 15. His wife, so he's a late starter. His wife was awarded all of his retirement accounts and savings, which was about $2.2 million at age 62. Most people would look at that and say, this is devastating. So what did he do? Well, I met him right after his divorce when he was 63, and after we identified his goals, we created a plan and started to implement that plan. Once we got him on a budget and curbed some of his spending habits, he was able to really put away a significant amount of money towards his retirement. We created a transition plan that had him selling 25% of his practice over 5 years, and he owns the building that his practice is in, which he'll keep even after he stops practicing to generate some income to help offset what he needs. So today he's 67 and halfway through transitioning his practice. He's still a little bit behind where he needs to be, but by June of 2016, if he continues to make the progress that we expect, he will be exactly where he needs to be. So he thought he was done when I first spoke to him. And the moral of this story, why I really like telling the story, is because sometimes we all just need someone to believe in us and have a vision of our future that maybe we can't have while we're in our low valleys, while we're going through maybe some hard times. So you have that in Monica, and you have that, who else do you have in your life who can have that vision when it seems like all might be lost?
Well, I think that's a great point and a great story, is that you just need the right people to believe in you and to set you on a path, because you could give up. You could say, man, this is, just taking me down completely, but you have to have the right energy. You got to get people to pump you up and have the right energy. It can be done. So, great idea.
Yeah. So the last thing, Jeff, we can go to the next slide. The last thing I wanted to end on was going back to really looking at life after dentistry, or even life during dentistry, but how do we have a better quality of life? So, we hear quite a bit from the clients and those that we work with that as much as they love dentistry, a lot of times there's a sense of overwhelming sense of just wanting to be done, or that there's got to be more to life, I guess is what we're saying. And so one of the exercises, and again, you can get this from the slides, that I have found to be extremely helpful, not only for myself, but for those that we work with, is called the Quality of Life Enhancer Worksheet. So the question is asked, what's more important in life than money? And you can see I've filled this out, and so that you get an idea of how this is done. And I know there are some people on the call that have completed this worksheet, so this will be a nice little refresher for you. But as, for example, health, can you delegate this? No. And how many additional hours would I like to spend on this each week? 4 hours. What are 3 activities I can do to improve this area of my life? Yoga, run 6 miles a week, ride my bike. It might be stretching. It might be eating healthier. But you can come up with those. And then what impact of improving this area of what's the impact it'll have on me by improving this area of my life? And it might give me more energy, less stress, live longer. So I've listed some other possible answers for the question life quality, and really what this will start to do is, again, kind of get the juices flowing as far as where you want to be spending your time that you can't delegate to anyone else, that only you can do, but that will help you have a better quality of life, so that at the end of the day, whether you're still working towards the end of your career or after dentistry, you feel like you are living a very good quality of life. And as an example, really quick, I had this conversation 2 days ago with the client, and she was telling me how she loves her work. She loves dentistry. She loves practicing, and she can't imagine doing anything but that. She absolutely is passionate about it. And as we did this conversation, she started to say, well, I have been meaning to go for a walk on the beach. I haven't, now that I think about it, I don't think I've walked on the beach in 2 years. She lives, you can see the ocean from her house practically. So sometimes it just takes you having to take a little bit of time out of your day, out of your life, to pause and think through some of these questions or some of these exercises. And I would encourage you to really take the time to go through this exercise, the quality of life enhancer worksheet, or to go through the ideal life questions that we talked about earlier in the conversation in the webinar. I'll say if you'd like a hard copy of this, I'll be happy to mail those to you. We have packets of these as a hard copy, so just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to mail these to you so that you can fill these out and go through this exercise.
So that should lead us to our next slide with your contact information. So let's see. One last slide for you, Jonathan.
Yep. So, Jeff, you can go to the next slide. So really at the end of the day, in order for you to know that you have a comprehensive plan, that you know you can leave dentistry on your terms, it should have these 3 components. You want to make sure that it aligns your financial choices with your most important goals and most deeply held values, that it helps you to get your entire financial life in order and keep it that way forever, and that you and your significant other have a 10 out of 10 level of confidence that no matter what happens in the markets, the economy, or the world, you will achieve your goals. So, Jeff, you can go to the next slide. For anyone who's listening, we have purchased this book called Values-Based Financial Planning. If you'd like a copy of it, just go ahead and email myself or give us a call or reach out to Monica, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of this book as a gift from us and Monica. And inside of that book is a copy of a financial roadmap that we can set up a 20-minute phone call to start the conversation of putting together your financial roadmap so that you can begin to take or continue taking the steps towards leaving dentistry on your own terms.
Oh, very nice. And to get a hold of Jonathan, here we go. So we've got Jonathan's name, we've got his telephone number on there, and his email address. And again, these slides are going to be set out there for you to look at later. You can write that down now. The phone number is 858-752-7179, 858-752-7179. And the email is jmoffat@alignedadvisors.com. So, Jonathan, thank you so much. I think everyone can hear your passion in this, is that you really wanting everyone to have a successful life after dentistry and just a successful life in total. And it doesn't always just mean the dollars. It means really a rounded approach, having someone have a round approach that really has a trusted and invested interest in you, that believes in you and wants you to have a good life. And I think that enthusiasm came through in this webinar. So thank you so much for your time putting these slides together. And, Jeff, do we have anyone on the line or any questions that have been sent in?
If you're listening on the line and you've got a question, just go ahead and say something. I'm looking online. I don't see any questions coming through. So that means we covered everything and everybody's good to go.
Well, we will check it because I have heard in the past that they are typing in questions, but they come a few minutes after our webinar answer. So if your questions do come in after the webinar ends, we will be checking for those to make sure that we do get back to you, because I think you will see those later, correct, Jeff?
Yes, yeah.
So we'll watch for any questions.
That's right. And again, if for some reason you're listening to this on the replay, just email those questions either to Jonathan or Monica on the email address that's listed here on the replay.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you for your time tonight to be our moderator and keep the slides going. And again, Jonathan, thanks so much for your time this evening and a great presentation. I hope you all do reach out to Jonathan, as I think if your advisor's not doing these things, you need someone that is, because it's important that it's not just about how the assets are being invested, but all about you, what's important to you and how to get to those goals. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.